Welcome to the Power in Motion podcast, the show for women who want to develop a kinder relationship with their body so you can feel healthy, happy, and confident without restricting food, doing torturous exercise, or constantly worrying about the number on the scale. I'm your host, Kim Hagel, size-inclusive fitness specialist and certified non-diet health and life coach specializing in body image. This podcast is here to provide weight-neutral, health at every size aligned information and coaching on sustainable habits and mindset shifts so you can feel your very best in the body you have right now. Let's lace up our runners and go for a walk while we chat. Welcome back. Today's episode is one that's really near and dear to my heart. It's not a topic we talk about often here on the Power in Motion podcast, but I think it's one that a lot of you will enjoy. Today, we're sitting down with my friend and colleague, Amy Kotha, who is, like me, a mother of differently wired children. And that's Amy's coaching specialty. She works with parents of neurodivergent children. In this episode, Amy's going to share her personal story, how she came to be doing this amazing work that she's doing by navigating the challenges that are inherent of raising a differently abled child. She actually has two of them. She'll share all about the complexities and challenges that are part of her story in learning how to understand and advocate for her children's unique needs, and actually how getting caught in the chaos and overwhelm of family life led to her own health challenges. And since that time, Amy has learned some really powerful tools centered around nervous system regulation and cognitive behavioral coaching, which is the same framework that I use in my coaching. Just the way that Amy has applied it to parenting is so unique and so cool, and how doing so has transformed her entire family existence, and now how she's built her practice around those tools, supporting parents to have their own back, and in doing so, how that enables them to best support their kids. So let me tell you a little bit about Amy. Amy Kotha is a board-certified coach through the National Board of Health and Wellness Coaches. She works in private practice with a focus on mothers of children struggling with neurodivergence, mental health disorders, or trauma histories. Her mission is to educate and support these women in a shift to brain-based parenting with a focus on achieving confidence, connection, and peace in their lives. With her combination of a business, clinical, and trauma-informed psychology background, Amy brings unique perspective and experience to her coaching clients. As a mom to two neurodivergent, internationally adopted daughters, she has also gained the personal experience that she considers invaluable in her work. And I agree, it definitely is invaluable. And I know that if you are also a parent of any child, or especially a child that's differently wired, you are going to really resonate and get a lot of value out of this episode. So let's jump right in. Hey, Amy.
Hey,
Welcome.
Kim.
How are you?
Good.
Welcome to the Power in Motion podcast. I'm excited to chat with you today. This is a topic we have not addressed ever on the podcast before, talking about parenting and specifically parenting kids that are exceptionally abled. So I'm really excited to chat with you about that. Why don't you kick us off by telling us a little bit about yourself and how you came to be doing this great work?
Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Looking forward to chatting with you.
Me too.
So I am a mom to two neurodivergent teenagers. Both of them were adopted from Calcutta, India, and both of them came home as young kiddos. Like my older daughter was 9 months when she came home, and my younger daughter was 14. So they weren't infants, but pretty close. So they had kind of hard starts, and that just continued. So I was actually the parenting of my kids that brought me into the career that I'm in with coaching lots of neurodivergent kids now, because I used to be my previous pre-parenting life. I was in IT and real estate. So it's been a really big jump. And I knew absolutely nothing about physical health or mental health before my kids. And so what a shift that has been over the past 17 years. It's been crazy. So both of my kids have multiple diagnoses, both physical and mental. Like you hear doctors talk about how not to look for the zebras, right? Like look for the horse, don't look for the zebra, don't look for the rare thing. Well, my kids always had the rare thing. So complex. And so over the years, I would try to manage these and figure out what was going on. And again, I didn't have any background. So it was a ton of worry and anxiety and research and trying to figure out what was going on because my kids were, especially my older daughter, she has both a physical and a mental related disorder that are both very rare. So no one knew how to help her. So years and years, she was misdiagnosed and mismedicated, and no one wanted to admit that. So this will sound very familiar, but all the health professionals diagnosed her as anxiety. So even all of her physical health issues, it must be somatic. It must be anxiety because they just didn't know. So they would look at the iceberg model where there's the tip of the iceberg is what you see, like the behaviors. And then you really need to look underneath to figure out what was going on. No one was looking underneath. They were just looking at the top. And, I'm a very research oriented person and I love to research and I'm very good at it. And I just couldn't go along with it. I'm like, this isn't her story. This can't be who she is. She can't be this child who is going to go through her entire life drugged into almost a stupor to get rid of these complex behaviors that we just didn't understand. And, she was unable to go to school and unable to function in daily life. And things are just getting worse and worse. And, to the point of, she was so depressed that she just didn't even want to be here anymore. And it was understandable because there was no joy in her life. So, I can't just let that happen. Just truly felt like there was something more.
Yes.
So finally, and I'm very privileged because I had the time and resources to actually look into that. So I went to grad school. I was like, I'm going to go do something in the medical field and I'm going to research and I'm going to solve this or at least even if I can't find a solution, I need to know what is happening. Like it just ate at me. So I was working really hard at that and I was taking care of the kids and my family was in chaos and everything was falling apart. And, when one child in your family is suffering with some type of special need, it affects the whole family. You have a special needs child, right? So you know, and just trying to do all these things and hold everything together. And of course, with no support. My husband didn't even understand and didn't see a lot of her behaviors because he traveled 5 days a week. So it was just a nightmare. And I, as a mom, was just barreling towards burnout. And again, I didn't understand it. So things just got bigger and bigger. And there was one day actually that I ended up in the ER. Actually, I was at home and all of a sudden I felt like I was having a heart attack and I couldn't breathe and my chest hurt and I felt like I was dying and got carted away in an ambulance and went to the emergency department and all the tests came out fine. And everybody said, okay, it's anxiety. It was a panic attack. And then I was under a lot of stress, but that still didn't make me happy to hear that, especially.
Were you so tired of that word anxiety by this point?
Oh my God. I know, you're like my child. I'm literally in the ambulance and the guy is like, not even very nice. The EMT, he's like, this is just a panic attack. Calm down.
Oh, okay.
Well, don't ever tell someone to calm down. It was so ridiculous. And that started 2 full years before I was diagnosed with what was actually going on. And I had maybe 3 more ER visits with the same symptoms because, especially as a woman and how women have heart attacks and they look different and they feel different. I couldn't just not go. So, I would go, everything was fine. And finally, one of the ER doctors said, you really need to see a cardiologist and get a stress test. And so finally I did that. And it was so horrible because my 24/7 by that point, I was in vertigo constantly. I was just always dizzy and tired and fatigued and couldn't think straight and focus. And just something was seriously, seriously wrong. And at the same time, I still had to take care of my kids and all the chaos that was going on. Right. but finally did the stress test and failed it completely and figured out that it wasn't actually a heart issue, but it was an autonomic nervous system disorder, dysautonomia, which it's kind of a form of POTS. If you've heard of POTS, like I know with long COVID, a lot of people are getting POTS. So it's more understood nowadays than it was then. How many years ago that was? But so at least I was finally diagnosed by a cardiologist and I finally had a
Mhm.
plan of how to deal with it. And so that was great, but it took 2 years.
Yeah.
And interestingly, that really pushed me to continue my research on what was going on and try to figure out, like, I kind of had to step back from grad school and then went back in. And I kept studying things having to do with nutrition and the brain. And I kept wanting to do my research papers on things that affected mental health and things my kids had gone through. And finally decided that I didn't want to come out of grad school and be a nutritionist and work with weight loss because that's all they pushed. And I'm not a believer in that. So that's somehow I found coaching during that time. I thought this the psychology piece is what I need. And my background didn't allow me to move into a school program in psychology because I didn't have all the classes, but coaching did. So I moved into coaching and there, we got the psychology of change and behavior change. And all of a sudden it was like I had all these pieces to the puzzle. They weren't connected, but I had all these pieces and I felt like I was on the right track. And interestingly, that's when I found Stephanie, our coach, Stephanie Dozier. And she was able to help me put all those pieces together and to
Mhm.
become a coach, coaching people with what I've learned through coaching and behavior change and the clinical piece that I learned, and to help other parents with what I've been through. Because once I started putting those things together for my family and my child and myself, I was able to get out of burnout. I was able to
Mhm.
lower my stress level very low. I was able to help my child and communicate better with her, in which allowed her chaos level to go down, and she's improved greatly. And my entire family life has become much more peaceful. We are not living in chaos. It's nothing like it was before.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was so life changing that I am extremely passionate now to work with other families because there are so many that just don't know,
No.
that were like I was and suffering and sick and having physical symptoms and illnesses. And just because they're in burnout and so stressed trying to help their kids and their families,
Yeah.
and not getting the help that they need.
Yeah. Yeah. So the tool of coaching and the things that you learned in becoming a coach, am I hearing you right that it helped you realize that being able to regulate your own emotions and calm yourself and reframe your thoughts was that missing piece that you
Absolutely.
needed to, like, settle all this chaos down? Not that it solved all the problems, that didn't solve
Right.
the
Yeah.
problems by any means, but helped bring the levels of angst down so you could feel.
Exactly. Because I think as moms, and I mean, I'm sure that you've experienced this too. I think the
Mm.
worst possible thing for a mom and the most stressful is not knowing how to help your child
Oh,
and
yeah.
thinking that you need to fix them because we're conditioned all our lives that that's our job to fix our kids.
Yeah, yeah, we're conditioned to it, and I do believe it's partly instinctual, like, that mama bear instinct is, like, I could feel it rising up in me even as you were telling your story. I was like, "Don't you tell her to calm down."
I know, exactly. It is. And so it's like, yeah, you can't get past that. And I tell my clients all the time, I'm like, I totally understand what you're feeling is 100% valid because this is evolution. This is survival. We are here to take care of our young and help them become adults. And when they're struggling and it's not working, for us to do that, like what do we do with that? No one's ever taught us what to do with that, or
Mhm.
that there might be other ways and that you can, step back and take a pause. And instead of hustling and working harder and doing more, which is what everyone told us to do, everyone told me to do it. In fact, oh, you'll love this. My daughter was in an inpatient program once because she was in such a hard place. And they go like a big round table meeting, and there were literally 10 doctors there, and I think some neuropsychologists and myself and my husband. And they they sat there and told me, we talked to her, we've analyzed all this information, and we really feel like it has to do with the mother. What? Like, excuse me? And they said, we don't feel like she's getting enough time with you. And I was like, this girl is literally
That's
Velcro to my side
that's your
24/7.
professional
That was
opinion.
that was a professional opinion that there was an attachment disorder caused by me because I was not spending enough time with my child. And oh my gosh, I just didn't even know what to say. I, I just pulled her out of it. I'm like, you're so wrong.
Yeah. You know what I'm hearing, Amy, as you're recounting this story is there's a lot of themes. Like I'm hearing a lot of confusion and feelings of isolation and overwhelm and jealousy amongst your other daughter and burnout. But what's really coming through is like a fierce, fierce love and knowing that you know your child best and trusting your intuition, although that's hard to do when you don't have the answer, but knowing there's something else here. Like,
Yeah,
well,
exactly. Exactly. Or at least I felt that I was so conditioned to believe also to put all of your faith in doctors
mhm.
and, believe that if they told me something, that was it. Like
Mm.
I didn't have as much education. I should just be quiet. That's how they treated it. Like, don't be that mom, right? Don't be that mom. Don't keep pestering.
Difficult.
And yeah. And it would literally make me feel ashamed
Mhm.
or like almost humiliated to go back again, which I did. And thank God, like I never gave up, but I can see how many parents would because it was painful to keep looking for someone else and to keep going back and saying, this doesn't feel quite right to me and being cast off. And that doesn't just happen with the medical field, right? Like happens at school and
Oh,
it
yeah.
happens with your family sometimes.
Mhm, mhm. And I'm sure along the way, there were lots of times where you doubted yourself. I mean, I'm a mom too. Obviously, there's been lots of times where I have doubted myself, and like I hear this from moms all the time. I think the most common theme that I see is moms not trusting themselves or doubting their abilities, like wanting more than anything to be a good mom and do right by their kids, but then never feeling like what they're doing is enough or that they're doing a good job.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's probably a big question, but what do you think is behind this pervasive self-doubt we all feel?
It's so hard. It's so hard to trust ourselves, and I just really think we grow up that way. I know I did. I was never allowed to express my emotions and trust that what I was feeling was okay and push
Mhm.
down all the time. And even when I was in IT and I was working at big corporations, and I was still treated that way as a woman in these big consulting groups with men. And it was just this very patriarchal, I think, piece that stifles us and makes us quiet and shuts down our voice. And it really just gets inside us and it makes us doubt ourselves when we really need not to do that. And it's so difficult to pull out of that. It was so hard for me to pull out of that. And I think, just raising your confidence. And that was one of the things that drew me to Stephanie was just listening to someone else and finding community. It's that community piece that is so helpful because we all need community and we all need connection.
Yeah.
And we get so isolated sometimes, like you were saying, when we're
Yeah.
parents, especially special need parents, we isolate ourselves. We don't feel like we can talk about things. It might be like stigmatized. We're not the perfect mom. That's a really hard thing to talk about.
Yeah.
But something that I have found out over the years is the more I talk about it, everyone has a story. Like
Sure they do.
everyone. And I find community everywhere I go when I talk about it. So it's taking that brave leap to be vulnerable
Mhm.
and to start talking.
Yeah. Yeah. I think isolation is a real struggle. I'm sure a lot of moms struggle with isolation, but I feel like it's worse. as a special needs parent. Like, I just feel like there's a certain lack of understanding of what the experience is like raising a child that's differently abled, right? Like, I don't think I knew how much I took for granted with my neurotypical children until I had a child with special needs. And I just find, like, when I share about some of the struggles of raising him, like, people just, they're like, "Oh, I had never really even thought of that." And they really don't have a lot to say because they don't have that lived experience, right? They're like, "Oh, that must be really hard." I'm like, "Yeah, like it is." Right? It really is. A simple example of, my son is 6.5 now. He has Down syndrome, and he's learning to talk, but he doesn't speak in full sentences. So, he doesn't come home from school and tell me about his day. I don't know who his friends are. I don't know who he plays with at school. I don't know how his schoolwork is going unless somebody sends me a message.
Right.
And the other kids, like other parents in that age group, are saying, "Oh, did you hear about this and this that happened at school?" And whatever. I'm like, "No." Like, I don't hear about these things, right? Um,
Exactly. Oh my gosh, I still have that with my kids as
Mhm.
teenagers in high school. Like I'm so glad that school sends out these daily digests. So I know what's at least happening at school in general. But it's a really hard thing. And you have to peer it in a different way. You have
Mhm, mhm.
to drop this, it's a paradigm shift. And it's so hard. It's like, that whole piece of learning like the cognitive behavioral coaching, right? Where we learn how our thoughts, how our beliefs shape our thoughts and our thoughts shape our emotions and our behaviors. And once we start looking at that and realizing, we have to make big changes and we have to stop judging ourselves because I think it's easy to judge ourselves when we're going through all of that. Like, what did I do wrong? Because other people judge us and we don't want to be pulled down by that. So it takes, I think, a lot of very intentional thought to get to know yourself in order to gain the confidence and the self trust to pull yourself out of that and be okay with this parenting and be able to move forward. Like it's this whole piece, like my whole coaching program center around like becoming a self again, getting to know yourself again,
Mhm.
because we lose it. Like I don't know how much we had it before, but then we lose it when we have these kids, especially kids who are, differently wired or have different needs. And you're so expected to spend so much time trying to help them, and then you lose yourself,
Yeah,
and then you're isolated, and all of these things are happening at the same time, and
yeah.
people don't understand, and then we just feel so alone
Yeah.
and stressed, and
Stuck and hopeless, and, like, it's like a spiral, right? And,
it
like, one
is. It
thing
just
leads to another, and you find yourself in a pit where you can't, right? So, and that mom judgment is real. Like, I think all moms experience that. We are so quick to judge each other, which I think is really problematic. We gotta do a better job of building each other up and
like
trusting other moms that they know what they're doing. But in this journey of self-discovery that you went through, what have you found most helpful to build up your resilience against the isolation, against the judgment, and to build your confidence that you can trust yourself as a mom?
yeah, I think there were a few pieces to that. So, awareness was really important to me. So, once I started to become aware and learn about, and I know I'm science minded, but you don't have to be a neuroscience scientist to get this, but I think knowledge is power.
Mhm.
So, getting the knowledge and understanding how our nervous systems work and what is causing us to feel the way we feel a lot of the time. And as well, it works for our kids too. And a lot of times, when I teach people this, they're thinking about their kids, but it's for themselves as well. So you're becoming aware of what's going on and why you're feeling this way. And like, why do I feel this black cloud? What is going on? What am I thinking? And then challenging those thoughts. Like, why am I thinking that? Like, I am making things so much harder on myself when I don't need to.
Mhm.
And, it's just setting your priorities. One thing I do with all of my clients when I first meet with them, which was done with me, my coaching certification, was learning how to really get strong on what your values are.
I love that.
Yeah. So, and it's funny because most of my clients come in, they're like, that sounds a little woo-woo, right? But not.
It's not.
I'm the first one to say, no, I am not a woo-woo person at all. I'm very science oriented. But figuring out what your values really are and narrowing it down to like your top 3 values tells you so much about who you are.
Mhm.
And then for me, it really opened up like, oh, okay, well, if this is my value, well, of course, this is why I'm stressed out about this. Like, if family is my top value and my family is in chaos, then
Yeah.
I've got to do something about it. So that means I have to drop other things in my life,
Mhm.
you know, and say no to things and find other resources and do whatever I can to support what my greatest values are and make sure that I'm in congruence with them. Otherwise, it causes you so much pain when you're trying to do something that doesn't align.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I think that was really important to me. And it really opened up how to become aware of what is going on in my life. So living my life according to my values has been just pretty life changing, I think, to me.
Yeah, I could see how that would get you out of that overwhelm because I have
Yes.
found myself like getting clear on what I value then helps me evaluate, am I living according to my values or am I investing my time and energy and resources into stuff that doesn't matter? And if so, then that can go, right?
Yeah,
And it brings me back into like, okay, I'm going to focus on these top 3 things and everything else can just take a back seat.
exactly. Like, money is not my top value. So I am not going to focus all my time on hustling to get money while everything is falling apart and then being so stressed that I'm not making 6 figures right now because you know what I mean? It helps you to really understand yourself better.
Mm.
And that is such like the beginning, just like the step through the door of figuring out other things about yourself too. And then gaining confidence because then you can learn about like, okay, so if I'm living congruently to my values and I'm feeling like this, what's causing it? And you can make much better decisions.
Yeah. Yeah. And just knock that stress level down about 20 notches, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you have
Absolutely.
that capacity to make good decisions, right? Because when you're in fight or flight and
Yeah.
overwhelmed, you can't make a good decision.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, 100%. Another thing I do with my clients after we do the values is like show them all the dimensions of their life and figure out, where their satisfaction is in each dimension and then talk about like why that is. And then they're piecing together the values with what's really going on right now in their lives. And then they can see what they're doing and what the results are. And it really helps to kind of start to get things straight and get on a path to making a few changes really, really slowly, right? Like
Mhm,
1%
mhm.
is fine. But yeah, it's really important to get clear because otherwise you're like stuck in that amygdala, in the back of your brain where you're just in fight or flight or freeze all the time and you can't think creatively and you can't problem solve. And yeah, that's a really hard place to be.
Mhm. And so what I'm hearing as you're sharing these tools that you use with your coaching clients, like none of it's about fixing the kid,
Nope. I know. Not you.
right? So you work with people who are overwhelmed and stressed out like you were, like no idea what's going on with their kid, no idea how to support them. And you don't help them necessarily with that. So you bring it back and kind of like, am I hearing you right? Like shelf that and then help the parent learn to manage their own nervous system, regulate their emotions, get in touch with their values, their beliefs, and like start to think about their life and their situation and their child in a different way. Is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Because once they start to see their child in a different light, once we can bring that stress level down a little bit so that their frontal lobe is functioning and they can think and problem solve and they can start regulating their body and then, they understand their child, then we can teach them more about how they can understand their child and the nervous system and like, mirror neurons and energy. And if they are dysregulated, their child is going to feed off of that. I mean, if your child is dysregulated, you're very likely going to be dysregulated as well. So you need to know that, right? Like you need to understand just the basics of how your nervous system works. So you understand when you start to feel that, like if my child starts to melt down and immediately I'm like, and my brain just starts going, oh my gosh, like the future is over and how is she going to go to college or, get married and have a child and be a mother and her, how could you? It's ridiculous, like where your brain goes when you get triggered by something that is just small. And what I have found is like, you can't really control that first thought, but you can control the second thought. So my first thought, it's still like my heart rate will jump. My first thought will start and then I'll pause and take a breath. And then I'm like, okay, here we go again. Hello, hello, amygdala. Thank you. And I realize what's happening. And I'm like, okay, that's not where we are. Like we are right here and she is triggered by something. And I'm just going to sit here and be with her and offer her safety. And she calms down. And then, it's okay. And it's not like I have to get rid of all my emotions. It's not like I'm not going to have one because we're moms, we're parents. We're not going to get rid of that. We don't want to.
No.
But I'm not going to meet her on that level. I'm not going to escalate it. I'm not going to fall into fear because that's what I used to do. When I didn't understand what was going on, I would meet her fear with my fear and it would escalate. I would try to calm her down and control her. And it was just like being in that ambulance and having that guy tell me to just calm down when I have never experienced this feeling in my life and thought I was dying.
Yeah, yeah.
She feels like she's dying. And if I tell her to calm down, like that doesn't work. But if I shut up and get low and talk, just be there with her, and just be its own presence and let her feed off of my calm energy and just breathe, then it works.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make a lot of sense to a lot of people and it takes time. You really have to practice it, but it works.
It does. And I can speak to that. Like this, Amy and I, though we practice in entirely different niches, we coach from the same methodology. We both use this cognitive behavioral coaching framework. And as a parent, I know that as I've implemented this type of coaching in my own life, it has changed how I parent, right? And being able to recognize my emotions as those sensations rise up in my body and sit with those feelings instead of like getting overwhelmed and anxious about my feelings. I can calm myself. And then I can meet my kids in a different way, right? Like I will say I was a much more reactive parent with my older 3 kids than I am now. And I'm so glad that I had Gage after I learned all of this coaching stuff, because when he's having a so-called behavior, which I'd like to talk about how I hate that word in just a second.
So I agree with you on that.
Then I can I don't have to get reactive to that, right? I can witness the behavior, stay calm in myself, regulate my own nervous system, and like I say, get low and then be a detective, right? Like I know that every behavior is coming from an emotion and a thought in him. There's something that he's thinking or perceiving. Maybe he's not even aware of his thoughts, not that he could tell me anyways, but there's something that's leading to that behavior. And then I can support that rather than just be like, why are you freaking? And I'm freaking out too, right? And yelling and all the stuff that I used to do. So it does work and it takes practice, but it starts with that.
It does. It takes time. And I have, most parents who come to me, and it was myself in the past too. I think it's a human reaction. I think all of us go through this is you want a solution. You want a bullet. Like people come to me, they're like, just tell me what to do. I'm like, I so wish that I could just put it in a little box and put a nice ribbon on it and hand it to you. You could open it up and solve everything. But it's a process.
Yeah.
It's not, you can't be solution and outcome focused because this is long game parenting. There is not a solution. It is a process. And the more you do the process, the more it becomes like muscle memory and the easier it becomes. And pretty soon, our brains they like patterns and repetition. And the more you do it, and at first everybody's going to screw it up, right? Like, never yelled at my child. But over time, it's less and it's less. And then they learn. And it's so great when your kid schools you on something you do wrong, right? Because teenagers are lovely.
Oh, aren't they fun? Aren't they fun? I have they love to point out when you're doing things wrong. But, I don't take offense to that. I'm like, you know what? You're right.
I don't either.
I do need a moment to go and regulate, and that's fine. And sometimes they'll be like, Mom, do you need to eat? You're a little snappy. Actually.
Oh my gosh, I know. And it's funny because it is, and just like you said, with you don't like the word behavior, neither do I. It's needs based, right? And so you're looking for what is the unmet need because that's what's going on. All behavior comes down to a need. Like their need is not getting met. So this is the resulting action. Like you said, be a detective and try to figure out what it is.
And the same is true for us, right? When we are having a reaction, it's an unmet need in us, right? Like I realized when I was doing all this, like I had a strong need for control and order and and then felt like if my kids didn't listen to me, that was a reflection on me as a mom. And like I had all of these beliefs that really needed to be shed and upgraded. And in doing that, then I was able to regulate better and not be so reactive, right? And meet my own needs instead of expecting my kids to be perfect so that I could be happy.
Oh, 100%. And like one of the parts of my programs is talking about communication that really works with our neurodivergent kids, but it's any person. And it's needs-based conversations. Like your child is a person. We need to not think of our kids as in like the hierarchical sense, right? Or at least a lot of kids that doesn't work with them. And so if you think of just things are needs based and you talk to them in that manner and it's respectful and it's caring and compassionate and empathetic and you have to do the same for yourself too. But if you can kind of get into that mood of thinking about the need, it makes so much difference. And even just talking to them, I know with my kids, I mean, they're teenagers, but if I come at them and I talk about what they need, what do you need? I think you might need this.
Yeah.
Then they're not gonna yell at me or escalate. They're gonna be like, "Oh,
Mhm.
you're like, okay." And they really do.
Yeah.
They it works.
Yeah. Yeah. Or just simply asking, and maybe they don't know, but asking the question, I think even softens the whole issue. Like,
Yeah.
what do you need? How can I support you? Right? And
Yeah.
maybe they don't have the answer, but at least they know you're on their side.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So my daughter who's got the really complex diagnoses, so she had something called the PDA subtype of autism. And PDA it has been described as the hardest disorder to parent because it is so paradigm shifting in the way that you have to parent because these kids, it's PDA stands for pathological demand avoidance or pervasive drive for autonomy. But basically, they have these extremely vulnerable nervous systems and they detect threat by demands. And they could be tiny demands. They could be demands from within their body. It can be daily life demands. It can just send them into completely like seeing, the saber-toothed tiger coming at them,
Mhm.
but it's just somebody asking them to brush their teeth. I mean, it is like it's so hard in order to parent it. You can't even parent it like autism parenting. You have to parent with this very low demand type of parenting and just take away demands and raise things in certain ways. But it's such a different type of parenting and it is so hard.
I get
But
it.
you have to think about these things. Like every time I talk to her, I have to put us on a level playing field
Mhm.
because people with PDA see any type of um, threat to their autonomy. If they think they're not on a level playing field, then
Mhm.
that is a survival
Very
threat.
stressful. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like it's just they either shut down or they go into like fight or whatever. And it's taught me a lot of pausing and
Mhm.
talking very nicely. But, again, like it just works to talk to her about her needs, just like you said. I'm like, I spend probably 50 times a day, I just ask her, is there anything that you need?
Yeah.
Is there anything I can help you with? No, okay.
Cool. I'm just gonna be over here. And it's kind of ironic you talk about, brushing their teeth. Yesterday morning, Gage was getting ready for school, and, I asked him to brush his teeth, and we were kinda rushing to get to the bus, and I handed him the toothbrush, and I was like, "Brush your teeth," and he's like, "Buzz off!" For a kid who's 6 and doesn't talk much. Like, that was loud and clear.
Wow. Yeah. Right.
Like, "Do you need a little more time, honey?"
Oh, that's so funny. Oh, yes.
Oh, wow, that was cute. Love
Good.
it.
Aren't you kind of like, I could tell them?
I'm like, way to advocate for yourself. Like, that was actually kind of,
Right. Pretty easy.
it wasn't so bad, right? Oh, you just never know what you're going to get, really.
Yeah, you really don't. You really don't. It's fun.
It is. I mean, there are challenges and there's so much joy, I think you could say too, from raising children that are a little different. And yeah, and it's so refreshing to hear your perspective. And there's a way that we can build our resilience to the stress that comes along with this type of parenting. So tell us a little bit about your coaching offers, the services that you provide, and where our listeners might be able to follow up with you.
Sure. So I do group coaching as well as one-on-one. And I actually have two groups. I have a level 1 and a level 2. And the level 1 group is called Illuminate. And it's basically for the parents that when moms come to me, generally they are in a state of chronic stress, probably chaos going on in their lives. They might be all the way into burnout. And so Illuminate is a shorter program. It's 8 weeks. And in those 8 short weeks, we are able to pull them out of that chronic stress or that burnout and give them some education as to, what's going on so that they can kind of move through that and help start healing themselves. And then we also start with some basic education that helps with their parenting for their child and their families, while also pulling them out of the burnout, like we talked about. When all of those things are working, you're feeling better, your stress level is lowered. So we talk about basic nervous system information. We do, communication, how to communicate effectively and healthy boundaries, self-care, those kind of things. And we do spend some time on coaching real life situations that they are going through.
Mm.
So that 8 weeks is a nice, get out of burnout and start parenting from, instead of a place of fear and stress, from a place of love and connection.
Yeah.
And then my second group program is like a level 2, and that one's called Empower. And that one is a 6-month program. And that's where we are really diving deep and we're getting to know each other on much more of an individual basis. They're getting a lot more individual support as well as within the group. And then that group dynamic is so fantastic. And 6 months of that is so healing. And I think all of us, even me, we learn so much from each other
Mhm.
through coaching for 6 months, as well as, diving deep into whatever they're struggling with. So that's a really, really cool program. And then, of course, just the one-on-one. But super excited because I have just opened my registration for my level 1, Illuminate. And then that one kicks off on June 7th. And my next Empower group kicks off in August. So
Fantastic.
very excited. And people can find me and sign up for those on my website, which is amykcoach.com. And I'm also on social media, so people can get to know me there and also get to my bio site where you can sign up for these things as well. And that's at Amy K Coach on both Facebook and Instagram. And I think it's the same on LinkedIn as well, though I think it has a number after it, but I don't
They'll
know.
find you.
I don't
I'll
use
put
LinkedIn.
I'll put all the links in the show notes so you can simply just click through and get to all of these places. Amy, is there anything else that you want to add before we sign off for the day? Any parting thoughts?
Just the one thing that I always want parents, moms, especially to understand is just the concept of you are not alone.
Mm-hmm.
You are not alone. We always say, there is no village. Where is our village? We need a village. We feel so alone and isolated. And you really aren't alone. You just have to, get a little brave, reach out. But there are a lot of us out here who are ready to support and just walk the path with you.
I love that. And I love how you've built your programs to bring that village together and create that sense of community. Because I think as a world in general, we don't have that like we used to. We don't have our villages.
Right?
So I think it's important that we are intentional about creating that.
I
Thank you
agree.
so much for this conversation. This was really valuable, and you've given us some very tangible tips about how we can support ourselves so that we can support our children better. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It was great talking to you. I appreciate it.
Oh, been a pleasure. Thanks for tuning into the Power in Motion podcast today. If you love what you're learning here, then I invite you to take the next step of embodying these concepts into your own life so that you can live your healthiest, happiest life and never again feel held back by your body. Coaching is the fastest, most efficient pathway to taking what you know in your head to actually applying it and seeing results. Whether you're looking to make changes around movement, food, body image, or all three, I'm here to help you nurture a kind, respectful, and trusting relationship with your body so you can feel your very best. Click the link in the show notes to book a free consultation, and together we'll uncover what's getting in the way of you having the results you want. You'll leave this call knowing exactly what you need to work on, and together we'll explore whether one of my coaching offers is a good fit for you. I can't wait to meet you.